Released in 2016, Vaxxed, From Cover-Up to Catastrophe, has been a rallying call for the anti-vaccination movement. Written, produced, and directed by Andrew Wakefield, a doctor who lost his medical license and was discredited by many mainstream scientific communities, it comes across as a passion project of self-redemption, as well as pushing conspiracy theories and pseudoscience. The story centers around a whistleblower at the CDC, as well as Wakefield himself. And while it neither exonerates Andrew Wakefield nor proves the corruption in the CDC, gullible people worldwide have bought into its claims. As such, this series is a long-form refutation of not only the film and its claims, but an examination into who is behind Vaxxed and why they made it. Hello everyone, my name is Jeff Holiday, and this is the very first episode of my video series on the film Vaxxed, From Cover-Up to Catastrophe. Now, this is going to be a long-form series. It might take a while to produce. Hopefully, if you're watching this in the future, I have many videos on this topic and you can watch them all in a row. But these types of projects take me quite a while to do. Previous to this, I had made a series on Bought the Movie, and that was a labor of love, but it took me a long time to finish. So, if you bear with me and be patient, it'll be worth it. Now I'm going to start this series pretty similarly to how I did with Bought, and we're going to first address the key players, who they are, and what they are in this film. So, that being said, let's begin. We're going to start with the big four responsible for this movie. We have Andrew Wakefield, Del Bigtree, Brian Hooker, and Tommey. Andrew Wakefield is the core figure, having directed the film as well as producing and co-writing with Del Bigtree. Granted, this film is effectively half about Andrew Wakefield. We're actually going to dedicate an entire episode just to him. And if you're unfamiliar with the controversy surrounding Andrew Wakefield or who he is, well, just you wait. It's pretty juicy. And him and his controversy being the genesis for pretty much this entire movement that has created this film as their magnum opus. Retelling his story will show you exactly how incredibly vile this whole situation is. But, that being said, let's touch on the other three. So first up is Del Bigtree. Now Del here is the co-writer and also the main producer of the film. Now credit where credit is due, Del has actually won an Emmy for his work on a daytime talk show called Doctors, where people can get medical advice from TV personalities. And a few things to point out though before we move on. Del really likes to brag about his Emmy. However, he usually fails to point out that he has to share that Emmy with the entire production staff, of which there are over 10. As well, in regards to the advice you might get from the doctors, a 2014 study in the British Medical Journal determined that evidence supported 63%, contradicted 14%, and was not found for 24% of recommendations made by the panel of doctors, and that the public should be skeptical about recommendations made on medical talk shows. Putting all that aside, Del here is a hardcore conspiracy crank, and he loves to retell the story about how when he met Andy Wakefield, he realized he was on to the biggest story of his life.
And I met Andy Wakefield and discovered that he had been working with Brian Hooker, and they had been speaking on the phone, and it is the most compelling evidence of fraud I've ever seen in my life. And I realized in that moment that I was looking at probably the biggest story of my lifetime.
He then went on a crusade to promote the film and spread the anti-vax narrative. Now, so committed to conspiracies and the truthiness of all of this, he once even stopped mid-evangelical style ranting at this one convention. It was called Revolution for Truth. He had to stop in the middle just to berate a reporter. Check this out.
This reporter that came here today, I'm not really into calling anybody names because she too is a child of God and unfortunately has been misinformed. It doesn't matter when a reporter comes into a room among us. It doesn't matter when someone says they're going to do a hit piece. every one of us will stand in front of any one of those cameras any day of the week. Why? Because we're telling the truth.
The truth, huh? I'll remember that. He's also the host of Highwire, an internet-based radio show mostly popular on Facebook. But let's have a listen to some of these gems.
Why do people join cults? Imagine a cult that actually sacrifices babies as a part of its religion. That's what it does. I want you to think, is there anything in the world, is there any reason in the world, is there anything they could offer you from a cult that would make you say, you know what, I'm not crazy about the sacrificing children part, but everything else about this religion is so great, I'm going to look the other way on that. Do you think that's possible?
Yeah, that's not hyperbolic at all.
Bring up a cult. First of all, can I have a definition of a cult? I think we have the definition of a cult here. Definition of a cult is great devotion to a person, idea, object, movement, or work.
You know, it seems that you might have selectively edited that definition there, Mr. Bigtree. Cult. Noun. A religion regarded as unorthodox or spurious. Great devotion to a person, idea, movement, or work. A system of religious beliefs and ritual. Formal religious veneration. A system for the cure of disease based on dogma set forth by its promulgator. Really?
That has built the foundation of a movement that has now just hit its turbo. It's taking off, folks.
If we say, well, you believe what you believe and I believe what I believe. No, we've got to tell people, brother, sister, I'm sorry, but that is wrong. And Jesus said, he said it exclusively. He said, I am the way, exclusive particle, the truth.
You're soaring into the universe of truth.
And he said, is not Aaron the Levite thy brother? You need to be his silent partner.
I don't even know, someone's telling me what room I'm going to, and you show up and here come 3 people down this hallway, and 4 people, this light is shining down the hallway.
What must I do to be saved? You've got to know what to say. You've got to lead them to the truth.
We are the truth. Stay in the truth.
Just saying.
I did a story a few weeks ago, the tragic story of Nicholas Catone. This is a baby that was born to Nick Catone and his wife Marjorie.
I was in the kitchen changing, emptying the dishes from the dishwasher, and I heard her scream, and I knew right away. She came out screaming that he's dead, he's dead, he's dead. And
when the detectives came in, I mean, they asked us about Nicholas's history, and as healthy and happy as he was, I had told him he was recently vaccinated. That was the only thing in my mind that was sticking out. And I mean, in coming weeks, it would wake me up at night. I can't explain it. Like, instantly in the middle of the night, I would wake up and I would have to go research because I just knew in my heart it was vaccines.
Now, this is a heartbreaking story, and honestly, they're all heartbreaking stories, but there's truth inside of this as well. It's grossly misrepresented. You see, the timing of the child's death is not consistent with a vaccine injury, and when they did the autopsy, it found no evidence whatsoever to claim that a vaccine caused this child to die. But as is all too common these days, facts and evidence are not going to support grieving parents from parasites like Del Bigtree.
And my point to you is that you are a part of a cult in that the medical establishment is a cult.
Now, we'll touch on Del a little bit more later when we get to the episode on propaganda. Next up, we have Brian Hooker. Now, the major contribution of Hooker to this movie is his involvement in the CDC whistleblower case. And given that the CDC whistleblower case is effectively half the movie, that in and of itself is also going to be in another video. I apologize. It might actually even take 2 videos because it's pretty meaty. But there is more to this man than just simply that. You see, we have to figure out how is it that a chemical engineer suddenly became an anti-vaxx zealot and an amateur epidemiologist. Now, from the film, we have Brian's story about his child.
My son, Stephen, was born in February of 1998. 2 weeks after his 15-month vaccines, then he lost all language. He lost all eye contact. You'd pick him up and he would just hang limp.
And again, much like all these other testimonials that we will see clipped out from this movie, it is heartbreaking to hear. It's hard to swallow. But it's more complicated than just that, especially when it comes to Brian Hooker. You see, he and his wife back in 2002 filed a case with the National Vaccine Injury Compensation Program, making the claim that a vaccine caused his son's autism spectrum disorder. And it was ruled in May of 2016 that they were not eligible. Now, I will point out that 14 years seems like a suspiciously long time for a court case, especially when you're talking about damages that might have happened to a child. However, with how complicated and weird this story is, that might be why. Now, the claim was denied for a few reasons. First and foremost, Hooker claimed that his child was damaged 2 weeks after his 15-month vaccine. But, as evidence showed, the child had shown delays as young as 4 months of age. In fact, the court had this to say about that 15-month vaccine appointment. Child received his 15-month well-child examination on date and was found to be healthy. However, at this visit, his developmental progress chart indicates that he had not achieved most of the expected milestones. His Denver 2 developmental progress chart indicates that he could not speak 6 words, could not run or climb stairs, could not remove garments or use a spoon, and could not stack 2 cubes. Indeed, he had failed all but one of the developmental milestones for 15 months. Following a physical examination of the child, Dr. Heller-Bear administered the usually recommended vaccines. These vaccinations of date were vaccinations that petitioners now allege to have significantly aggravated child's autism. Now keep in mind, again, Hooker says this in the film.
2 weeks after his 15-month vaccines, then he lost all language. He lost all eye contact. You'd pick him up and he would just hang limp.
And the pediatrician's records from that visit say this. 1-year-old with 1-day history of low-grade fever, irritability, decreased appetite, nasal congestion. Child has a history of recurrent ear infections, is scheduled for tympanostomy tube placement by Dr. Fong in about 4 days' time. Mom is concerned that he may have an ongoing ear infection prior to surgery. And in those notes from that very visit where he took his kid in, apparently he's noted that the child is completely screwed up, but no notes in there. The pediatrician for some reason wrote no notes about a loss of language, a loss of eye contact, or a limpness of the body. Furthermore, the parents had reported to the doctor well previously, before the 15-month mark, that there were signs of autism, that there were developmental delays. So why exactly push that it was this 15-month vaccine visit that caused all these problems? Why? And it comes down to basically the story changing. You see, he had originally tried to file, claiming that earlier vaccines had caused this to his child, but he missed the 3-year statute of limitations. So, changes it to 15 months, saying it aggravated his autism. Now look, I have great compassion for families that have been touched by autism. I truly do. However, this court case failed categorically on every metric, and it shows the duplicitous nature of Brian Hooker, and thus everything he says in the film. So getting back to his story, apparently inspired by the plight of his child, Brian Hooker then enters into the anti-vax arena, and he starts challenging papers, challenging studies and preconceived understanding of vaccine safety and autism. Now, not only was he remarkably bad and failed every single time he tried to attempt this, which is not really surprising given he is a chemical engineer and not a researcher, not a human biologist, a vaccine researcher, anything like that. But, in one of his own studies where he's trying to prove a connection between autism and vaccines, he inadvertently, this is amazing, inadvertently disproves Andrew Wakefield. But even more so, his own research was done under shady principles. You see, he didn't disclose when he was doing these studies that he had an open court case trying to prove that vaccines cause autism. Do you think that maybe when you're doing a study to try and prove that vaccines cause autism, you might have a monetary stake in it, and that might call the validity of your study into question? Just saying. He also neglected to mention that he was a board member of Autism One, an anti-vax organization that funded one of his studies. But he also sent a charming letter to the former director of the CDC, which included this gem. I would personally urge you to review the Book of Matthew 18:6 and consider your own responsibility to all children of the United States, including my own son. But whoso shall offend one of these little ones, which believe in me, it were better for him that a millstone were hanged about his neck, and that he were drowned in the depth of the sea. Spicy. Now, potentially one of the most clownish participants in this cavalcade of pseudoscience and bullshit is Tommey. Polly has made quite a name for herself as peddling anti-vax conspiracy all over the world. In fact, she was banned in Australia for 3 years because of this film. But the story about this actually goes a little bit more deeper than most people would understand from the headlines. You see, Polly wasn't just doing a film tour, she was secretly playing it all around the country. Seriously. Participants who would buy tickets to this often wouldn't know until 2 hours before the screen time where it was even going to be shown. And the venues that she booked oftentimes had no idea that that movie was going to be played. For instance, one public school was told that they were all going to be learning about organic vegetables. Using shadowy tactics and misdirection to try and show off a film that could have disastrous public health effects? Wow, wait a minute. What was it that Del Bigtree said?
Every one of us will stand in front of any one of those cameras any day of the week. Why? Because we're telling the truth!
Oh yeah. In 1997, Polly and her husband Jonathan welcomed their second son William into the world. After 13 months, according to them, he started developing severe problems and was eventually diagnosed as having autism spectrum disorder. Jonathan, sometimes described as a disciple of supplement pusher Patrick Holford, went on a quest to try and find a way to treat his child's autism. For a time, they paid for supplies of the neurotransmitter Secretin to be brought over from the United States and then administered by a medical professional intravenously into Billy. Now, if you couldn't have guessed, this didn't work. You see, Secretin has never been shown to be an effective therapy. There are no studies whatsoever that support it being used for autism. But around this time, they got invited on to Tonight with Trevor McDonald, a show in the UK, where they blathered on about the success they had with this treatment. And after that appearance, they got tons and tons of correspondence, letters, messages from angry, frustrated, scared parents of children with autism. And so from there, they created something that they called the Autism File, a magazine that's routinely put out, and it's full of garbage anti-vax nonsense. But Polly wasn't done there. She started a charity called the Autism Trust in 2007. Then in 2009, she started a billboard campaign to get the attention of the Prime Minister. Now I'm going to show you the billboard, but I think I'm going to just let it speak for itself. Just look at this. Yeah. So the Autism Trust created a facility in the UK in 2012 called Polly's Place, and it was a simple enough concept. Basically provide some services for autistic people and their families, and in exchange, from the arts and crafts that they do, Polly's Place then sells it. Sounds reasonable, right? I mean, some of it's pretty good. Not bad. And shortly thereafter, they moved to Austin, Texas, and they've been having some difficulties building a center there. Now, I imagine this is likely because the land that they got was donated, and also they're relying on a builder to donate the labor and supplies to even make the thing, rather than use the land for building really expensive homes. Now, let me be clear. Things like Polly's Place and maybe even the center in Austin, Texas, if these are just benign places where people get services and the help that they need, more power to them. I feel nothing but appreciation for their efforts in that regard. But keep in mind, these are people who have been peddling scientifically illiterate, factually incorrect dog shit, which flies in the face of not only scientific consensus, but public health as a whole. Keep that in mind. Now, at some point, Polly met Andy, and they began a business relationship. And their very first venture, as far as I can tell, was an autism reality TV show talking about autistic people and the families that are affected by it. And this is how they came to know Alex Spourdalakis. Now, the television show never happened, and shortly thereafter, young Alex Spourdalakis was brutally murdered by his mother and his grandmother. In response, Wakefield made a documentary called Who Killed Alex Spourdalakis? Now, I want to be clear. This next part is going to suck, and you are going to get angry. Alex is a very troubled kid with severe rage issues. A lot of children with profound autism, they are worse off than most kids going through puberty because they don't have any outlets. And as such, young Alex was dangerous. He was violent. To the rescue comes the Autism team, Andy and Polly's reality TV crew that they themselves were a part of. Now, they didn't just document what was happening to Alex and his family. No. They got fucking involved. Oh yeah. You see, Alex's mother had been offered a place in a psychiatric facility for Alex to go a week before he was murdered. And you can see in this screenshot, Polly saying, no, we can't do that. Documentaries are supposed to be about documenting, not influencing, not getting involved. Probably because they were filming a reality fucking TV show is why they thought it was appropriate for them to be giving them advice. Who knows why they didn't want Alex to go into the psychiatric facility? Maybe it was because they'd have a hard time filming him if that was the case. Regardless, a 14-year-old boy was then a week later poisoned first by his mother and his grandmother, and when that didn't work, they slashed his wrist and they stabbed him to death before they themselves attempting to overdose and commit suicide. And after this, Wakefield makes this fucking documentary, and he claims that the main perpetrator killing this young boy was the failure of the psychiatric industry. Instead, he reasons, young Alex needed to be treated with such things as like gastrointestinal therapies. That would have saved his life. Fuck you, Andrew Wakefield, and fuck you, Polly Tommey. What the fuck? Ultimately, I think Polly's obsessed with attention. Either media attention or just attention in general. The idea of trotting out her pain, her autistic son, especially on a big old fucking movie, and then touring around the country to talk about it, that must have been impossible to deny herself, to get that juicy attention. You have someone who was a news reporter, a wannabe actress, even a singer. Yes, this is a music video that she was in. Imagine that. Who, as she begins to age, finds that her disabled son holds the key to an entire career in the spotlight. All it's gonna cost you is your dignity and your integrity. What a steal, huh? Well, everyone, there's my first video on Vaxxed, and these are very difficult videos to make. It requires me to watch this awful documentary way too many goddamn times. But next up, we're gonna take a look at the documentary itself. We're gonna jump right in, get into the meat and potatoes of what exactly is wrong with this film. And I hope you're ready for it, because it is a nightmare, and I'm gonna walk you through it. I'm gonna hold you by the hand, and we're gonna go skipping into the depths of dumb shit, bullshit pseudoscience. And I'm excited, and I hope you are too. So I will see you next time. Take care. Bye-bye.